verse 7 onwards. Allow me to read this, please. Moses took his tent and pitched it outside the camp, far from the camp, and called it the tabernacle of meeting. And it came to pass that everyone who sought the Lord went out to the tabernacle of meeting, which was outside the camp. And so it was, whenever Moses went out to the tabernacle, that all the people rose, and each man stood at his tent. Each man stood at his tent door and watched Moses until he had gone into the tabernacle. And it came to pass, when Moses entered the tabernacle, that the pillar of cloud descended and stood at the door of the tabernacle, and the Lord talked with Moses. And all the people saw the pillar of the cloud standing at the tabernacle door, and rose and worshipped, each man in his tent and door. So the Lord spoke to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend, as he would return to the camp. But his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, did not depart from the tabernacle. You know this story, this portion quite well. So I do not want to overkill it, but I want to underscore some parts of it to see how it would matter to BLC, especially as the Lord has brought you to a very significant, historic, symbolic moment like this. I just noticed that there is a plan of action, a chronology that is already planned. Oh, I see several versions of it. Okay, I hadn't seen any of those, but congratulations on the plan of the tabernacle that you are going to build, that the Lord is calling you to build. Okay. Exodus 33 has a very rough background. God has broken company with the Israelite people. They have just started their desert journey. You know that already. Now, Moses went into the mountain as the Lord called him up to the mountain and gave him the tablets, the commandment tablets. Even before the tablets reached the valley, the foot of the mountain, the complete principles of the tablets had been utterly violated. The law was given and it was already undone before it reached the ears of the people. It was that fast. Anything that is well built will already have the destroyer implanted in it. That is the way nature works. That's the way spiritual laws also work. And if there is a destructive force entering a spiritual citadel that the Lord builds, then you don't have to be surprised, except that the Lord is already here, because only He initiates good things. And evil things enter without permission, because Jesus said, except to rob, to steal, and to kill, the evil one does not come. So the thinking of the people have been corrupted. Sometimes, I'm a little sympathetic to the Israelite people. Okay? I've seen a lot of people angry with them. I'm a little sympathetic to them. You know why? Have you waited for somebody who has gone into a mountain remotely? And, you're waiting at the foot of the mountain for this man to... Have you waited 40 days? Hello? Have you waited 1 week? Have you waited for that person one day? I can't wait for someone for 15 minutes. I lose my patience, I walk away. These people have been there for 40 days and they said, he's an old man. Who knows if he croaked or not? Okay. There he is. And Moses a lot of people think he went to the top of the mountain only once or twice or thrice. That's not the case. This is not the time to show it. In one particular spot alone, you can find him going up and down at least 8 times. That was his habit. Moses was, he was a mountain climber. Just as you walk around your courtyard, this guy was always ascending and descending, ascending and descending. He had subjected to his body to such a heavenly law that it began to operate in the higher realm. So the normal condition of bone weariness, muscle weakness, and wasting of the body, none of these things affected him. Not even his eyesight, even at the age of 120. All right. So God got very angry as the law did not reach its target. But there are so many other things happening in between we do not know. So allow a little relief for the Israelite people. God is still interested in them. But God wanted to make sure that his anger is really registered. Okay? And so what does he do? He broke company with them. He was not going to communicate with them. But he was not going to discontinue communicating with Moses. And Moses found the company of these people so unbearable. What did Moses do? It says for the first time in the scriptures that Moses had a private tent. Are you with me? Moses had a private tent. That was not the kudaram. That was not the tabernacle he built. He had a private tent. And he put that private tent way outside the camp of Israel. Now, camp of Israel is another thing that we have to get our minds wrapped around. People say there were 6 million people there. Or some make it 2 million people. Okay. Some make it 1.5 million people. There were quite a few people anyway. Okay. Now, if you are moving, let's say 1 million people from place to place to place to place, think of the logistical challenges in that movement. And the Lord had given them a kind of civil engineering model of their camp settlement. In the very heart of their camp, I read an engineering description, estimate of the area it would take. They say it would take as much area as DFW Airport and its surroundings. Yeah. Another version also projected that it would be 150 square miles, not just straight miles, square miles, in the middle of which is to be the tabernacle. Are you with me? So you have this enormous multitude at equidistant. It's not shabby living. It is all very well planned and spaced and measured. No unevenness. It is so very beautifully arrayed. And in the middle of that is the glory of God dwelling in the tabernacle. Tabernacle simply means a tent or a house. And the Lord is living there. Now, what ought to be in the middle of your life, middle of the camp, middle of the home, ceases to be there. And Moses, who constantly is interacting with God, now goes outside the camp. See that? That intimacy with God. is lost. It's gone. But as Moses goes on the sidelines, he establishes a prayer tent. It is a prayer fellowship arrangement, a prayer tent. And we have no description of it at all. And we know that it is not furnished. But Moses goes regularly, and as he goes, something happens, Every man on that Tabernacle Street, that 10th street of Moses, rises and faces the street to watch Moses passing by. Moses doesn't preach. Moses just goes to meet with God. And as he reaches the tent, God, like a very impatient friend, is waiting for him, for Moses. And as soon as Moses enters the tent, poof, like a shutter, a big cloud pillar comes and stands and covers the door. And inside it is God speaking with Moses as a man speaks to his friend. That's the language of the scripture. As a man speaks to his friend, Moses is speaking. And there is one character there who is not given any descriptive account at all. His name is Joshua. Joshua at this time is quite a young man. If 100 years it was not considered old age, this guy was only 40-something, barely 40, crossing. Okay, and he is a warrior. And he is directly mentored by Moses. That Moses was his education. Mentored by Moses, and had his education that way. And was an exceptional warrior. But a warrior who is also spiritual. I'm going to tell you a little tip. You will find, I don't have time to go there, you will find that some of the most spiritual people in the scriptures, most disciplined and clean living and firm in their faith are military people. Have you noticed that? The captains, they're Shatadivan, centurion. You look up any centurion who is mentioned in the scripture, everyone has an impeccable personal code, of behavior. Now, this man is one such. Old Testament. He is going to be a future general of Israel, especially after they cross into the promised land. Okay. He is standing by. Moses never has to call him. He's always there. And when he is not engaged in anything outside, he is always at this prayer tent. He is trained in prayer. We could have any amount of programs and development ideas around us, but unless it is driven and saturated by prayer, nothing works. Nothing works. A prayerless theory falls flat on the ground. It doesn't do any good. It just dries up your mouth. That's all it does. Okay? Now, it is better to spend 5 minutes with God than 5,000 minutes with human beings who are just vainly bragging about their successes or their dreams and so on. Okay, let's move on. While Moses is in this tent, without him having to say anything, did you know that the virtue that is going to visit him in the tent is already on display? On display? No, you didn't get that. Moses is going to meet with God. And that fact is radiated throughout the camp. And people just look at Moses and they don't have the courage to sit there to get into small talk, to get into other acts of vanity. They're profoundly filled with respect. No preaching necessary. It is, you have probably heard this. I'm glad that people are using sources from other than just a handful of extremely small denominational references and so on. It was Francis of Assisi who said, by all means preach the gospel. You have heard that. All means preach the gospel. If necessary, use words. We don't want to knock down people with words, but let people be touched by the Spirit. This is what Moses does not use words at all. And he was bringing down the words which had dashed against the rock and shattered. Okay, so it is a wordless preaching that becomes mightier than any word. All right, and people recognize that. Another thing, even when we condemn that a nation is so grossly unrighteous, carnal, and unusable, there are plenty of people. Everyone along Moses' way is still with God. Did you notice that? I read that. Everyone, it's not that the whole nation has forsaken God. All right. Now Moses is given a responsibility in chapter 25 onwards. That is for the construction of a tabernacle. The Lord said, I want to create a house. It's like speaking to little children. God is saying, Moses, I want to have a house. I want a house in your village. Okay? Did you know that Moses is the head of a city-state? You know, this nation of Israel is a state. It is moving. Oh, okay. Moses, I want to live among you. Build me a tabernacle. And then the Lord himself gave two names, two men. These two men will do it. You don't have to sweat it. Okay? The two men are, one is Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur. Now, the man, he was one of the associates of Moses as he went up on the mountain to pray. You know all that. It's going to get larger and larger. So let me come back. Son of, Hur. Now, he will have amazing abilities. Okay? What are the things you would do? Read Exodus 31, verses 1 through 6. And I know from real life that if somebody comes to a pulpit and say, read, people are going to say, come on, go home and, follow. Just save us the trouble. So I'm careful not to dump too many verses on you, but you will find a big do list given to one man. One person is given, that is Bezalel, is given the following charges. What must he do? He must create a tabernacle of meeting. He must create the ark of the testimony. We should talk about each of these, but I'm not going to. Ark of the testimony is such a frightfully venerated thing. You cannot touch anywhere, go anywhere. You can't see it, you cannot touch it. It is hidden in the Holy of Holies. That object, so sacred, made completely of, gold and handiwork. The Ark of the Testimony, and the top of it called the mercy seat, and the table and the utensils, the pure lampstand, the garments for ministry. Garments for ministry. I don't see many, well, there are quite a few from Kerala, but not as many as I would like. If you go to Kerala, you will find a lot of clergymen, especially bishops and above. Bishops and archbishops and and cardinal and so. Oh my goodness, they like to parade their, costumes. I probably shouldn't use the word. I mean, I like it. It is good, but sometimes if all you have is garment and nothing else, there's no value in it. Okay. Am I fading out? Okay. So, but a man who is living in the desert has to fabricate these great garments with weaving work, tailoring work, with beautification, all the filigree work, all kinds of devices to make these very attractive. Okay? So, garments of ministry, anointing oil. It's not any oil with a dash of a few powders and, a mixing of this or that. It is so specific. Everything has to be prepared. Ingredients have to be prepared in such a way, and no other person should create. Nobody should create the oil similar to that. Apparently it is very aromatic. It is very fragrant, and don't be tempted to reproduce the aroma by your own devices. Powerful spiritual lessons. You can appear to be very spiritual, but don't cook it up. Okay? If you do, you're going to be smitten. All right? And so, I don't have to tell Bezalel any of these. Bezalel, by the way, means under the shadow of God. I mean, if you're sitting under the shadow of God, you cannot have a shadow unless there is a person right next to it. When that person moves, the shadow moves. Okay? So Bezalel's name is under the shadow of God, man. Okay? The shadow of El. Okay. So when you're under the shadow of God, when the shadow touches you, whatever the shadow's source wants, you can create with his permission. There is no problem at all. Okay. So he has to devise curtains. That's a big study in itself. Cutting, carving, engraving, and all manner of workmanship. He has to work on metal. He has to work on wood. He has to work on fabric. He has to work on thread, silks, and all of that. Let me ask you, where do you get all these supplies? Where do you get all these supplies? In the desert. If it is in New York, I can understand. If it is in Rome, I can understand. If it is in another big city, cosmopolitan city, where resources are lavish, amply available, you can have them. But in the desert, you have to have ingredients of the rarest kind. And one person, the other fellow, Oholiab, his name also has a meaning. His name means the tent of my God. That's his name. The tent of my God. Okay. These two will coordinate the complete creative work and design and execution of the project. Then I got an idea. Something became very clear to me. The Lord said, one of you will chase 1,000, and two of you will chase 10,000. 10,000 is not the limit. If you find one person doing something that would take 10,000 people, don't be surprised, because there is a shadow over that person. Okay. When Gideon was told that not 32,000 or, but 300 will be sufficient. There was this principle at work. Okay. If you will be patient with me, I have difficulty. Just keep on going, but bear with me. Since prophecy of Zechariah. I'll give you something. Don't worry. Zechariah chapter 10, verse 4 onwards. I'm just reading. You don't have to sweat anything. I'll just read it for you. Okay. From him comes, the him is Judah. From Judah comes the cornerstone. From him the tent peg. From him the battle bow. And every ruler. Okay. Now, one person will be good enough to produce a variety of things. You can call a man of Judah the cornerstone, the tent peg, the battle bow, the ruler, and so on. There are other attributes, so I'm not reading further. So if one person can do what 10 people can do, then you don't need 10 people. You only need one person. See? Okay. The project is big. The project is to build a tabernacle in the manner the Lord has given instructions. And only one person has actually received the word, and that is Moses. What Moses tells these two guys, they have to clearly understand. You see? There is no blueprint. It is all verbal. And so Moses, the Lord tells Moses, and Moses grasps it. And Moses tells Bezalel, and he understands it. Moses also might have shared it with Oholiab, but they understand it. But we are also told that a lot of the people of the camp voluntarily, without any persuasion, voluntarily brought their offerings. Valuable things. Okay? There was a general request sent out. It was completely voluntary. You will find the announcement for it in chapter 35. Chapter 36 of Exodus. Chapter 36, verse 6 says, Moses had to make an announcement, stop bringing money. Stop bringing offerings. We have overflow here. We have overflow here. I'm going to tell you something like a secret. It concerns you. Maybe I should keep my mouth shut. But I'm going to do it. In the early days of BLC, I was very happy with the Word of God. I just enter into the Word of God, and there's no telling where I'm going. And so it's always a pleasure. But one time somebody gave me a hint. Maybe somebody outside, not within the church, that they should be taught about tithe and offerings and so on. And people should be, church in general should be. And I thought maybe I will be guilty before the Lord if I don't. I am most uncomfortable talking about money. And people don't like to throw away their money, mostly. They like to keep it. Okay? And I'm also of the belief that if the Lord wants money, He'll take care of His own needs. And so I tried this out of a sense of duty. And of all the word deliveries the Lord gave me the occasion to do, this was the least enjoyable to me. Now the Lord, I am not going to do this. This will be the end of it. Okay. And so I don't know if that was good or not, but whenever I read this portion about Moses, I'm very happy. Moses did not sweat, did not push, shove it down their throat, none at all. A short announcement and the place was heaped up with every kind. They were not bringing a few naya paise. They were bringing all the precious stones and gems and metals, all those things, plus all the silks. People used to go from one continent all the way to the other, as they would do with China, to get what? Silk. And the path that they traveled is called the Silk Road. Did you know that? That's because silk was so valuable. And people were bringing all of these. So, chapter 35 was a call for collection. 36, Moses had to hurry and said, please stop it. And there was one other occasion later on in the scriptures when King Joash came to, now you're worrying about Joash. You go find out, you can read later. Okay, Joash had a repair project for the church, for the whole Jewish church, let us say. And people started bringing money. And they had a very good priest also at that time. His name was Jehoiada. Jehoiada and Joash was a very powerful combination, spiritual and political. Okay, Israel was a powerful entity at that time. And they also had to do the very same. We have surplus money, the accountant said. And the king, and the Jehoiada had to put a stop to the collection. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added. It's not a casual opinion. It is a wonderful spiritual principle. So there is no fundraising here, only gift raising. Voluntary gifts, no pressure. Notice there is a surplus in such cases always. And as that happens, I'm confident that you will have to make a Moses announcement or a Jehoiada announcement, not to keep on bringing, but to stop because we have had more than enough. But I'm also more importantly seeing that some of you will turn into Bezalels, where whatever you touch will become whatever the shadow had dictated. And you will bring forth beauty and glory and worship. When Bezalel was asked to make garments, but he was not a tailor, was he? When Bezalel was asked to I lost my thread there. It'll come back to me. What was I saying before that? Huh? Garments. Yeah, I got it back. Thank you. There is another great sermon hiding there. Moses was told to make garments for his brother and his sons. His brother Aaron had 4 sons. And Moses was asked to make garments of beauty to bring dignity, that's the word used, bring dignity to his brother. What is the call of the Christian faith? The Christian faith is in applying my faith to my life, I will unconsciously dignify my brother. You read the story of Moses. Moses is my greatest hero in the Bible. And those of you if you have a recall, you will see how many times I've spoken on Moses. I will never get tired of Moses. Never get tired of him. Okay. When Jacob died, he distributed all the land, you remember, to each tribe. Okay. When Moses died, what did he give to his sons? You are lost. I am too. He gave them nothing. And if I were a son of Moses, I thought, I've got quite a father. Moses was so completely unselfish that he didn't want to take anything, and he was just like the sons were like regular citizens of Israel. Their names are mentioned later on like an accident, nothing more than a little footnote. That's greatness. That's greatness. Another person in Moses' place would have declared himself king, and his sons would have been princes and princesses. Okay. Bezalel's job is to make clothes, to make somebody else's sons appear in grandeur and splendor. No wonder the tabernacle door, from the door onwards, is jammed with the glory of God. Where your selfishness is ruling, there is no glory coming and descending at the door. Moses gave the instruction to people, and it is the smoothest project running in the world. Some say it took 6 months. Some say it took 7 months. It is more or less in that range. All the work that was dictated by the Lord has been carried out. And finally, what happened? Exodus chapter 40, you will see that everything as Moses instructed was completely performed, and there was a dedication of it. And chapter 40, the second half says, the place was so filled with the glory of God that Moses himself was not able to enter the tabernacle. Now that is a very desirable difficulty. See, when you travel, certain places I don't want to mention, those places are so notorious because they have such bad roads. I'm thinking of Indian roads, okay? So, such huge pits in the middle of the road, and they have been there for 7-8 years. Nobody's bothered, okay? And puddles and ditches and so on. This is done perfectly, on time, under budget. No stress, no anxiety. And it is just celebration, 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 glory descending. Pastor, how much time do we have? You can be honest with me. Your problem. Oh, okay. Sounds like grace extension of time. I don't want. I can stop now. Okay. Okay. I shall be quick. So, come back to me where I started. This is a little private tent that Moses had to carry outside the camp so that he can have his private time with God. On his way, on his private time with God, he publicly radiates the grace of God. And he's not making any statement on that. He just reveals it by the way of the quality of his spirituality. Then comes the other tabernacle, the formal tabernacle that was built according to the instructions that the Lord gave him. All right, but it doesn't stop there. When it actually begins the longer desert journey, it is a good way. It's when it starts the longer desert journey, it moves from place to place. Nobody has an accurate count of it. Some say 35 places they camped, some say 39, some say 42, and so on. But let us ignore all those numbers. Let us go into the promised land. In the promised land, the first thing that went ahead of the people was what? The Ark of the Covenant. Okay. The Ark goes and it splits the river. The waters are held further up at the bank of Adam, and the Ark goes in. It is stationed for the next 7 years in a place called Gilgal. Okay. And from there it moves to a place called Shiloh, famous place in Jewish history. And there the tent has been for 369 years. That is decent stability. 369 years. And then it migrated to another place called Nob, N-O-B, which is a village where priests live. And remember, that is where Saul sent slaughterers to kill the priests of the Lord. Okay, that's the time of David. And then it moves again to another place called Gibeon. That's the place where Solomon comes to inquire of God. But don't worry about all of that now. So altogether we are talking about something close to 500 years. Okay. Then, finally, Solomon comes and he builds a temple. A temple. And you know all about the temple, whereas the tabernacle took 7 months to complete. Solomon's temple took 7 years to complete. Whereas you had Oholiab and Bezalel to supervise all the artwork and the fine work of the construction of the temple. Solomon had a man who was 50% Jewish of the tribe of Naphtali, the tribe of Naphtali or Dan, one of the two. He was the chief designer and architect for it, and King Solomon hired him. He was a man with foreign skills from the nation of Tyre. Okay. And there we have the great example. 1 Kings chapter 8 says, when the temple of Solomon was dedicated, there was such great glory descending that the priests were not able to minister because of the glory of God. Now, sometimes when divine favor comes in such large measure and in such large power, all that is even the very best in the world, from the human side, becomes impossible to offer. That is a sign of recognition. It's like a little baby coming to receive the Prime Minister with a bouquet, and the Prime Minister, instead of receiving the bouquet, picks up the child himself or the child herself and gives the child a kiss. Which one would you rather have? Would the minister accepts it or takes in the offerer himself or herself? That's what happens when the temple is dedicated. Okay. After that, you do not see, we have no trace of the tell me, you have no trace of the tabernacle. We certainly have no trace of, we have certainly no trace of the tent of Moses. Okay, let me put this in perspective. I started with the tent of Moses that comes into being as a result of a private necessity of a great man to be with God. And then that man already is given instructions to construct a more formal tabernacle, which he does and dedicates. And that is reflected in a greater place called the temple of God. That becomes a universal point of attraction. Okay. I want to say, in every growth of fellowships or churches, if there is the favor of God shadowing that fellowship, that gathering, something similar would happen. I commend you, BLC, for doing that. Because we started in the 90s, originally, as I said, in Kochama's home. And then it became a little more open, a public organization. We named it, I don't know if you folks remember, it was called MCF. And there were about 50, 60, 70 people there coming on Saturdays. And then some of them said, we need to be a little go deeper, and we have to have a church gathering like setting. Okay, so then somebody offered their basement because that's all they could afford. And that's where the thing happened to be existing for the next while. And this is a guy who offered actually this guy's wife that primarily volunteered the basement. And lo and behold, all of a sudden one day, there was a surprise invitation from Pastor Tedeschi of the Summit Avenue Assembly of God through Gigi. Gigi's American pastor said, brother, come, use all of what we have. No questions. We will even pay for your insurance to use the chapel. And we were housed there for, I don't know how long we have been there. 10 years we were there. So, from one tent to the other. And finally, God has now given you a hill, I am told. And here you will build something which will reflect the glory of God. But you're moving from glory to glory. And that's what matters. And God is with you. His shadow is pushing you into grace and greater grace. May that continue, and we will continue to talk in the days following. God bless you. Thank you all very much.